Hi. A few weeks ago, I videoed a small art exhibition that took place in what used to be Flagg's old college store in Broad Street. It had been set up temporarily by the Oxford City Council and had two exhibits by an Oxford-born artists group. One of them was by a German artist, which was a sort of visual fusion of two parts of the Louvre, an elevator shaft and a hall. And the other was a sort of what you might call a semantic fusion, a fusion of ideas between the idea of cold storage, as in a fridge, and the idea of archival, as on devices such as typewriters, tape recorders, and so on. That exhibition lasted for a few days after I videoed it, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, the Louvre exhibit was replaced by something else which I was going to show you. Unfortunately, the exhibit was removed before I had time to video it, and Flagg's is now empty. One thing I noticed about the shop, incidentally, is that there's a very fetching coloured glass window at the back near the right-hand side, and I'll show you that later on in the video. But anyway, I was looking up on the web to see whether I could find the exhibit that had been removed. It was an example of what's called blind drawing, where an artist will look at something and draw it, often by following the contours, without looking at the paper. And I'll say that again, they draw the object without looking at the paper, so they don't have the feedback that comes from looking what you're drawing as you draw it. That may sound not a lot of use, but in fact it's a very interesting and pleasant experience in several ways. Firstly, it seems to enforce a huge amount of concentration, and when I do it at least, I often find a strange sort of inner glow creeps up on me after half an hour to an hour of doing it. On one occasion I got the same sort of intense inner glow that comes if you eat a chili without noticing and it explodes inside you. But that doesn't happen every time. Another thing is that because you're focusing so intensely on the object rather than the paper, you often produce a lot more detail, and it can be great fun to look at that afterwards and try to work out which bits of the object you were drawing, you were concentrating on, and why. And you can then use those parts in another drawing to produce a more finished version. So those are two things that I like about blind drawing. One is the sort of inner glow that you sometimes get, and the other is the detail it produces, and it's like seeing something afresh when you look at your drawing afterwards. And the sort of things you might notice include details in the contours of faces, particularly, but they also include what an artist might call the line of action, which is the sort of main flow, the main line of movement and positioning of limbs. And you don't always notice that when you're drawing an object from scratch, but you may do when you look at a blind drawing that you've made. And I'll just say that at the end of the 19th century, I think it was, there was an artist called Harry Furniss who used to draw political cartoons. He was allowed into the Parliament buildings in London, but he wasn't allowed to draw, at least officially, while he was there, and he cultivated the habit of carrying a little notebook in his pocket, a sketchbook, and sketching surreptitiously on that. And that was a form of blind drawing. But it seems from what I've read that he trained himself to do it well enough that he could almost use those drawings as final cartoons. Check out his cartoons, they're really nice. Anyway, I wanted to show you those blind drawings, so I had a look on the web this morning, but couldn't find them. I went through the name of one of the exhibitors, Anne Griffiths. She is the person who did the fridge exhibit, the one that showed objects such as a tape recorder in a fridge, the one that merged the idea of cold storage and of archival storage. Okay, well, I didn't think Anne Griffiths had done the blind drawings, but I thought I might be able to find them by following connections from drawings she'd published elsewhere, such as her website. And I wasn't able to do that, but I did find something else that's very striking, and it's cornflake art. It seems that Anne has always had an interest in collecting and taxonomy, and one of the pieces of art she produced was an arrangement of cornflakes, and I literally mean cornflakes. These things, Kellogg's, was an arrangement of cornflakes on paper, and she says that she'd sort of classified them taxonomically. She saw variations in type and had arranged the cornflakes according to those variations. And so what I naturally wanted to do then is to show you an image, but here's where copyright comes in. I'm not even allowed to paste in a copy of the search results from Google's search engine because all the images in it are likely to be copyright. Anne does have an image of one piece of cornflake art on her website, but I'd have to write to her and get permission, and though I'm sure she'd grant it, it would take me longer than I want to delay this particular video. So instead, I've made my own piece of cornflake art, and here it is. Now those are literally Kellogg's cornflakes, and they're stuck to the paper, apart from one little cornflake which seems to have escaped. And I stuck them down with this, which is a nice, safe and easy to use adhesive. It's quite tacky. It comes in the form of a long stick like that, so there's no fluid to get messy, and you just rub the thing you want to adhese on the stick and then put it on the paper, or you can rub the paper. I asked one of the AI programs, ChatGPT, how to attach cornflakes to paper, and it gave me several answers, and not all of them were useful. It suggested 3 fastening methods, including pins, and I had to point it out to ChatGPT that pins would splinter the cornflakes, so don't believe everything an AI program tells you. Anyway, I used Prit, and this is my attempt at cornflake art, and it's certainly not as good as Anne's, but it will give you the idea. And I've sort of varied them, arranged them according to various types of variation. So size, there are some little ones on the bottom right hand corner. The ones on the right hand edge tend to be more sort of ripped. They've got holes in, or jags in the side, like the one that's currently growing in East Africa. The row at the top is varying according to size, and then you've got a group on the left of that which curl up at the edges. Now, I'd not realised before that there was such variation in form of cornflakes. Some of them are flattish and some of them curl almost right round. And if anybody can hear me now, because I'm in a common room, if anybody can hear me now talking about how cornflake shape varies, I think they'd think I was mad. So I hope you don't. You can see the cornflakes actually standing up there. Those two there, while others are flattish. So that's cornflake art from the side, and that's cornflake art from the top. Anne had more cornflakes on her paper, so they almost entirely fill it in a sort of grid. But I felt I like open space, I like white space anyway, and this also breaks the cornflakes up into different clusters, each of which shows a particular characteristic. And I'll just add that this is an interesting artistic endeavour, but it's also very important to machine learning if you're trying to get a computer to learn something about objects and how they vary. You may not have anybody who can explain in advance the way in which cornflakes vary in shape, so the machine's got to try and work it out for itself by examining loads of them and then finding common patterns, and that's quite difficult. I'll also say, and this will probably resonate with about 1 out of 100,000 viewers, that there's some very nice maths behind this. Technically, what I've used here is an instance of what's called the UMAP algorithm, where you take a collection of points in a high-dimensional space and you squash the space down to, in this case, 2 dimensions, so that you can visualize the variation. And this doesn't entirely preserve the true shape of the clusters and so on, but it goes a long way. So it helps you understand visually what goes on, which I think is very important. And it's also got a very nice mathematical description, which will be understood by about 1/10 the number of viewers that I just mentioned, which is that it's an initial object in the category of projections from cornflake space to 2-dimensional space. And that is just so elegant that I wish more people understood it. But anyway, there's both some very sophisticated maths and some art behind this. And I'll just say that I don't know what they used to eat in Russia around the time of the revolution, but if, say, L. Lizitsky had access to Kellogg's cornflakes for breakfast, we could call this cornstructivism. Cornstructivism, get it? Anyway, that's what Anne Griffiths does, and this is my best attempt at explaining it to you, given that copyright prevents me from using the images that are already on the web. So look up her website. If you Google Anne Griffiths cornflake taxonomy, you'll find some write-ups, including an Oxford Mail write-up, and plenty of pictures of her work. And she's done lots of other interesting things too. Now, she doesn't actually live in Oxford, but I do cover interesting things that happen outside as well. And I believe she has a studio in Oxford anyway, and she's exhibited in what used to be Flags, as I said. So there's definitely an Oxford connection, and it's yet another facet of the city that we're in. See you next time.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Try and pronounce everybody's name correctly for the next 45 minutes to an hour. You're then paraded out. You change it up.
Too young for that. I prefer to.
Yes.
Papa, tu viens?
That's pretty impressive. This is what
One more step. I like yours. That's very good.
Oh, no shit. Oh,
Why are you so dressed up?
no, that was because they needed it.
On a flower seller. I can take it.
Thank you, please.
Is you two or you're the whole family?
Yes.
Let the car go through the frame.
Well, I look my